Barber College Success, brought to you by Craig Charles of Crown Cutz Academy, JC, Crown Cutz Academy, Bristol, and Craig's Crown Cutz downtown JC. Spreading love the Tri-City way is one way, but spreading love the Crown Cutz way is one way. Today we got a banging episode for you. We got a deep episode. I don't know what we're going to call it. We're going to call it Mob Ties. It's going to be great. It's going to be a really great episode. But first off, my two co-hosts, they on a break this week. But you know what? I'm going to hold the fort and knock it out the park today. We have a great podcast for you today, and it's going to be deep. It's going to be fun. It's going to be informational. We're going to go way back to Sicily. Introduce yourself, my host.
Hi, I'm Santos Cicerillo. I come from Hesperkites, New Jersey. Came to Tennessee in 1958. And my dad was a barber, started way back in Sicily at the age of 12, and carried his skills to America to support his 5 sisters and a mother and father over there. With his skills, he knew that he could do a lot better here in America in cutting hair, supporting his family, and doing well in this United States of America.
That's big. That's big. This is going to be one of our biggest podcasts. You know, we broadcast across the world, and we're going to have people listening from all over the country. We have upwards of 140 episodes, and we're in the top 25 podcasts around the world. So shout out to FeedSpot for ranking us in the top 25 podcasts. And we just keep coming with you with some new, fresh episode, new, fresh information. And this podcast, I couldn't wait to just talk and vibe with you, Santos. So talk about what does the barbering industry mean to you? What does barbering mean to you?
Well, to me, it's an art, first of all. And if you take it really serious, it's a skill.
Right.
I know from watching my dad over the years, his barbershop was called Sal's Sanitary Barbershop. It was so
big.
clean. His body was always immaculate.
His dress.
The barbershop was immaculate. His customers, when they came in, they left cleaner than when they came into the shop.
They came through a drive-through.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was a family type atmosphere, because we lived upstairs from the barbershop.
Right.
We were 15 minutes out of the city, and people that came off the bus in the evenings coming home many times would stop in the barbershop.
Right.
And get their haircuts before they went home for supper.
That's major.
Maybe they had to wait a little bit, and my dad would say, "Sit down, you wait, go up a stessa, Fanny feed you." There was always something on the stove,
right.
And they'd say, "No, I can't do that. If I do that, my wife won't. They get mad that I won't eat it. Your wife would know how to cook. A Fanny feed you, And so it was a family atmosphere. The barbershop was always people in there, and
it was fun.
It was a fun place. I used to kid people that my father was the barber, my mother cut the hair, and I was the little scissor that ran around the chair. And, just by watching my dad over the years cutting hair, although I never got licensed to cut hair, I learned what my dad did as a skill.
Right.
And a love for his craft.
So talk about how your dad started and where did he start?
He started in a little barber shop in Sicily.
And that's Sicily, Italy.
Sicily, Corleone. And when he dropped out of school, he went to learn that trade at the age of 12. And so he ended up cutting hair there. As a matter of fact, in 1956, I visited that community, and I went and visited that barbershop.
Wow.
And there were still some old timers when they said, "Oh, questo è figlio di Santo, Cicirello. This is the son of Sal."
Right.
And they remembered my dad, and they were saying, oh, he cut the hair standing on that box, learning how to do that. And
So your dad moved from Sicily to New York at what age?
at the age of 18, he came to the Bronx, and he had an uncle who sponsored him to
Right.
come to America. And as I alluded to earlier, it was that he could make more money here supporting 5 sisters and a mother and father. And
And he started cutting hair back in Sicily at the age of 12 years old.
right.
So talk about how did he get into cutting hair?
Well, again, he went there to learn the trade.
But first, he didn't initially go to cut hair. He had another trade he was getting into at first before he got into the bar.
Right. With a large family, everybody needed a pair of shoes.
Right.
And his father said, go learn to make shoes. And back then, you had to get the leather, you had to tan it, and you had to then shape it and make the shoes. But doing that, you got your hands stained.
And it beat you up.
Oh, gosh, yeah, it was tough. And he didn't like that. So the next venture was barbering. And it was a lot cleaner. My dad, again, was immaculate person,
Yes.
wise.
And how old was he when he started?
12 years old. And when he came to America, he was 18. And
So from the age of 12 to 18, he was cutting hair in Sicily.
and Sicily.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was some fun stories he would talk about that at the end of the day, those days there were long hours.
Right.
And they would say, they called him Durido, Sal in Italian. You go cut the priest's hair. And so he would go cut the priest, and when he got there, the table was set for 12 people could eat.
Right.
And it was. And he said, I would cut their hair. They never asked me to sit down and eat with them. And he said, when I got done cutting their hair, they would sit down and make believe. Maybe they were praying, he said. They wouldn't pay me, and I'd go home, and I'd tell my mom and dad, I cut the priest's hair. They didn't feed me, and they didn't pay me.
What?
And then
What kind of mess
then
is
he
that?
said,
You hearing this, Mitch?
yeah, I would get a whipping for talking bad about the priest.
Yeah, I would talk bad about the priest. If I did him a service, he didn't pay me. I'd be like, you're a freeloader. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, anyhow, it came to time.
I guess he was getting preyed upon. That's his payment. I pray for you.
I pray for you. Yeah. That wasn't filling up his stomach. Because when he got home, there wasn't enough food for him to eat on.
Right.
And so he finally ended up that he was going to come to America.
So before we get to America, he's cutting hair from the age of 12 to 18. Did he talk about some of his experiences cutting hair from that age, from 12 to 18?
Well, not too much. If you know Sicilians, they're close to the vest.
Right. So I'm thinking at 12 years old to 18, between that gap, and he must have seen some things from 12 to 18 that he probably didn't even speak on.
Oh yeah, well that's it. The expression "fatto," do your own business.
Right.
You be seen,
And not
heard.
Wow.
And if you know the Sicilians, they do a lot of talking with their hands,
Right.
with their eyes, and motion. You pick up on all of that stuff. It's
I mean, that must have been scary because back then it still had kind of mob ties in that area.
well, yeah, and that came over to America.
Right.
To the Cosa Nostra to take care of the family.
Right.
Which was a good thing in the beginning.
For sure.
And then that's just like everything else, it got out of hand.
So did your dad tell you any stories about between the ages of 12 to 18 before he moved to the United States of things that
No,
he didn't talk about it much?
it was just then the war, started, and the fact that we were going to get as much supplies of clothing and
Right.
medicine that we could send to the
So in a sense, he was at that age. He was taking care of the whole family because he said he had a whole bunch of sisters.
Yeah.
His mother and father. So he was the man of the house at 12 years old.
That's it. Well, in an Italian family, if you're the oldest boy, even maybe you have older sisters, but you're the oldest boy, you got to take care of the family.
Right.
That's That's the bottom line.
And being a barber, I mean, and we talk about barbering being a great trade, a trade of prestige, a trade of integrity, but people don't realize some people was at between the ages of 12 and 18, whatever that is for him, he was looked upon to take care of the family.
That's right.
In a trade that a lot of times people deem not essential.
Yeah. Well, people back then, now we became in the age in after I call it the Beatle age, where the hair started to grow long and style. People wanted to look respectful, clean. If you needed a haircut or not, every 2 weeks you were going to be getting a haircut.
Clockwork.
Yeah. You didn't have to make an appointment in the barbershop. Hey, Friday night, you were going to be there. Saturday evening, you were going to be there.
Right.
If you were going to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning for your shave,
Right.
My dad was in the barbershop at 5 o'clock in the morning because those three-piece suit businessmen,
Right.
they
need to get cleaned up.
They wanted to look clean. They went to work with a suit and a tie.
Wow,
Vest.
that's big. And thinking about that back then, I could just imagine what your dad have saw coming from Italy and then going to New York now at the age of 18. And
Oh, yeah.
so he could have wrote a book that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but again, he was close to the chest. When you were young,
You've seen and not heard much.
you sit over there.
Right.
If my dad said get up, you get up. If somebody said to you, "Oh, would you like to have a drink?" I'd have to look at my dad first.
Right.
If he went
He gave you the head nod.
head dog, I could have it.
Right.
If he just looked at me like,
You already know.
you're not going to get that drink.
Right, right.
By that look. They called it the señata. He's signaling you.
You got some hand signals being like, yo, you can cross the street or you can't.
That's right.
By a nod of your head, your eyebrows. That's interesting, Mitch. What you think?
Yeah, it was a whole different world of discipline.
Right.
And he was disciplined in his business.
Well, the thing is, in a barber, as a barber, you have to be disciplined because your clients expect you to hold some things to the hip. When they talk to you, have conversations with you, they respect you so much. You build a bond with your clients where they expect you, when you say certain things to them, they expect you to just keep it to the hip.
Oh, yeah. He was like a shrink
Right.
in the barbershop. Whatever they told him,
Right.
Yeah.
So
he
now,
was locked up.
So now he moved to New York. What part of New York?
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Uptown Bronx.
And now he's a barber.
And he went to work for a barbershop that was owned, I don't know, maybe that man came from Sicily too, who
Right.
knows. Mr. Verzi was his name. And my dad worked there, and when he was 28, he met my mother in New Jersey.
Wow.
And
Across the bridge.
Across the bridge, and they got married, and then he started a barber shop in Heights, New Jersey.
Wow.
And so I was born there in Heights, above the barber shop, and my dad worked there in that barber shop until 1971.
Wow.
When he retired at 65.
Wow.
And, there was good clientele. Even after he retired and came to Tennessee, people that would retire and go to Florida, they would stop at Fannie and Sal's in Tennessee and say, I got to get a good haircut while I'm here.
So he was still cutting hair while he was in Tennessee?
Tennessee, yeah. People in the neighborhood found out that he was a barber.
Well, you know what they say about Al Capone. He was stopped in Chicago in Johnson City. This was the midpoint.
Yeah.
So your dad had the same friend stopping at the midpoint before they went to Florida.
Well, matter of fact, during the Kefauver investigation time, that was before your time, I'm sure. You were in the world. But anyhow, two of his boyhood friends, Sal and Willie Moretti, were friends of his. They were in the mafia. And so They never came to the barbershop to get a haircut. When they wanted a haircut, the limousine, the Cadillac, would come pick up my dad. My dad, I used to call it the gym bag. It looked like a gym bag.
He was going to do some surgery, some operation.
That's right. He had that little gym bag.
He was performing a hit on a haircut.
That's right. The way he go, cut their hair, they drop them back home, and that was usually done on either a Sunday or a Wednesday, because the barbershop was closed on Sunday and Wednesday. And matter of fact, we did not have a telephone in our house because my father was a fear. He was straight line. There was no left, no right, It
was straight.
Straight line. And
why he didn't want a telephone?
Because he was afraid that they would suspect him of having taken book.
Okay.
The back room was the book.
Right.
And they used to say to him, Sal, tu sei stupido. Hey, you're dumb.
Right.
Follow book. He'd say, fatti do. Stavio misha. Fatti do means you do your business, I'll do my business, and we'll stay friends.
And that's the best way, because the minute he just crossed over, it'd be difficult to come back.
Yeah.
Because they'll expect him to do other things.
Right. Well, I had an Uncle George, may he rest in peace, godfather, Uncle George. He had a barbershop in Lyndhurst. And as a kid, I could always know when it was time we were going to collect.
Right.
Because he was a nervous wreck.
He was shaking.
Yeah, because he took book in the back room.
That was dangerous.
And, hey, if your book didn't balance out, you better have the money.
They're coming for you. You're knocking on the door.
Hey, where's the money? And there was no questions. Like a teenager, like clubs, they would say, the young Sicilians.
Right.
They'd like to have guys like a teenager do the running. They're not going to put a teenager in jail.
I mean, well, you look innocent. You're not suspected.
Right.
Right.
And so, you played it. And we didn't have that telephone for fear that maybe there was a suspect that we were taking book.
Wow.
And so there was.
So your dad. So were your dad ever nervous just going on even though just cutting someone's hair, but what they're doing? Was he ever nervous? Did he come up with any stories?
No, my dad was. He was street smart.
Right.
He knew what. If you were standing over there in the corner, he knew what you were doing.
How much was a haircut then? Did he ever tell you about how much he was getting for haircuts?
Haircuts was 75 cents.
Right. So how much was they paying him? Like $1.50 or something?
I don't know what they paid him, But when he retired, they went up to $3. That was 1970, I guess. Yeah, 1970 was $3. And I'll tell you a story about that. Prior to that, my dad worked all by himself. Mm-hmm. It was easier to do that than have to all this other garbage with the government and what have you.
But then also dealing with barbers. Barbers are some of the hardest people to deal with when you're working with them. Oh. So working by himself, he did himself a favor.
Yeah. And well, anyhow, when they came unionized, there was other barbers in the town, and so they had a meeting, and he said to them, they wanted to go to raise the prices.
Right.
And he said, you're going to put yourself out of business. You start raising your prices. And it didn't set well with the power, the unions. Well, one day in the barbershop, picture this. Here's the front door. The barbershop was long and narrow.
I can see that. Yep.
Okay. First chair, second chair, third chair, cash register.
So he had a couple chairs in there, but he was just working by himself.
Live by himself. Because that was from a long time ago. Well, these two goons come in.
Oof.
All right. Because they were afraid he's going to buck them.
What do you mean by buck them?
Not go along with the prices.
Okay. Yep. So they want him to raise prices and change prices.
Yeah. So right behind my dad's chair, there's a radiator. And in my dad's barbershop, there was mirrors all the way down this way, mirrors in front, mirrors all around. You could 360 degrees. You didn't have to move your head.
You can see everything.
Right. You could see that guy in the back was picking his nose. You know. Well, anyhow, one guy stands by the cash register. The other guy stands behind him. They're not talking to please my dad. He knows why they came.
Right.
They're not his customers.
Right.
They don't come in there.
On a regular basis, they just, they mean business. They got the long trench coat.
Right. Well, in the barber business, you cut the guy's hair. When it's ready, you put the soap on the guy's hair. You strap your razor.
Yep, get it nice and sharp.
Yeah. And with that, my dad wheels around, sticks it up against the guy standing behind him.
Wow.
On his neck.
Uh-huh.
And he says, I know you're not here for a haircut. I know why you're here. Because when this guy leaves, you're going to bust me up. He told the other guy by the cash register, you walk out of here now, this guy lives. I cut his throat with this razor.
Wow.
You know? Well, anyhow, the guy at the cash register, he walks out. My dad escorts the guy out the door.
I mean, but that's scary just to do that, knowing what those guys in.
That's right. A couple of days later, some other guys of authority come in and apologize to my dad about that incident.
What?
Yeah.
What they apologizing for?
They said, it's okay. We're going to leave you alone.
That would terrify me. I would close my barbershop and leave.
Nah, not my dad. He was going to stand his ground. Like I told you, he was straight laced.
Right.
And I think because he knew Willie and Sal Moretti, the mafioso.
Okay.
And they said, hey, he's a good guy.
Right. So when they anoint you, put that holy water on you, nobody can't touch you.
That's it. You know, so that
But you look at pictures of those guys back then. Those guys was always clean laced, always clean shaved, always had a good haircut, always dressed well. So they visited the barbershop at least twice a week at times.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, the barbers came to them. They came to them.
Well, Moretti, he lived up in the south end of town, and around his house there was a wall built around it, you know, and you didn't know what went on behind that unless one of the doctors had to go to the house.
I mean, you could imagine, and we talk about how barbering is an essential trade.
Yeah.
Barbering is so essential because it's part of grooming. It's part of the makeup of keeping you clean and fresh. And those guys, you see them back in the day, they were really meticulous. Had their crease in their pants, had their three-piece suit, had the full-length jackets. So with all of that, their hair had to be taken care of.
Oh yeah. Well, you know,
and most of them were clean shaved.
Well, yeah. When you got out of the chair, you stood up. My dad would have a little whisk broom. You know, you didn't have a vacuum cleaner like that now.
That's high maintenance.
Blush them all off. You know, towels. When we would get towels from the barber supply, we had to go through each one of them before we put them in the barber shop.
Why?
If they didn't look clean for my dad, we had to take them upstairs, wash them, and get them clean.
That's good.
Before we did that.
Your dad was meticulous.
Oh, yeah. You sat in the chair, was a towel around.
Yes, a neck strip.
The whole way around you. Then he put a piece of paper around your neck and another towel. Yeah.
That could be expensive. 3 towels in the paper.
That's right. And the brush.
The foam.
Well, some had their own cup, but he had a cup with paper. He put in there, put the powder in it, mix up it. When he was done with that, that was gone. Next guy would have another clean.
Man, so let's talk more about those. What do you call it? How much did your dad ever say how much he was getting paid when he's cutting those guys? Obviously, you can't. Those mafioso type of guys, they just can't come in the barbershop and sit down.
No. Well, again, what went on
Right.
there didn't come home.
Right. So he couldn't cut. He wasn't cutting those guys at the barbershop. He had to go to their
House.
or even
Confine, whatever it was.
And most times back in those days, a lot of storefronts were like speakeasies, where it'd be a butcher shop or a barber shop or something in the back.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Oh. When I was I was growing up, my dad would say, "You don't go over there. You don't go there. Pool halls."
Right. Because in the barbershop too, when you're a barber, you're the heartbeat of the city. So anything that's happening and going on in that town, your dad would know. Any and everything.
Yeah, but fingerprint. He just. Well, one time the FBI. My dad, you're at the barbershop. He said he was noticing, and this guy came in, opens up things, the FBI. And he said, I've been watching you, told my dad. My dad said, yeah, I know. He said, the other day you were standing across the street, making believe you're reading a newspaper. The other day you had your car parked down the street, sitting in your car, making believe you're reading a newspaper. You was parked up on the side street over here.
Wow.
He says, why are you watching me? He said, again, thinking maybe he cuts Willie's hair and them, what's going on?
Right.
And he said, you're a modest man. You're not making a lot of money. He said, we've seen your income tax, and we've been checking you out just to see
how much money you making.
how much money you're making. Now, if he had been crooked,
right,
he would have been nailed. But again, my dad being street smart,
he knew what was going on.
Yeah, just I would say but in Italian, he was being street smart.
But your dad, obviously, as a barber, he knew when a different type of clientele come in.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Was it? How did he first get involved in cutting that type of clientele? Because once you're a good barber, people are going to find out.
Well, it got word. Like I said, first of all, he was clean.
Right.
Clean. If there was too much hair on the floor, if I walked through the barber shop and he did that to me.
Mm-hmm. You know what that meant?
Sweep that floor.
So he was operating like those mafia guys too. He would just, his eyes and his demeanor would tell you what to do.
That's right. If he looked over there to the craft that he had for the towels, there was too many dirty towels in there. You better get those out of there. Get rid of them. Or if it's a little higher, I had to differentiate between the lilac, the witch hazel, and the water bottle.
Wow.
Which one needed water in it? Just by eye connection.
He'd just look over there and wink his eye and just...
Yeah, that was it, If the awning on the outside of the building,
right.
If I'd be playing down the street somewhere and I heard a whistle, when my dad could blow the whistle off the roof of the house, I'd run like the devil to the house, and he would look out the window. That means the sun is going down in the west. You better go get the crank, get out there and crank that awning down.
Wow.
And when I was cranking that awning, I didn't look at the awning. I looked at my dad. And when he went like that, that's as far I went with the awning.
Right. Wow, interesting. He was making movements with a lot of not even opening his mouth.
That's it. And, scissors, razors, on the day off, that razor, take a hair, go, dink, knock it in half, just touching it.
How did your dad first get involved? Obviously, he knew who the mobsters were. He knew who the guys was. How did he first get involved with that? Did he?
Well, I think it started over in Sicily. You know, they were boyhood friends.
Right.
And it's just, you know.
Everybody came over in the boat. Everybody came over together, and then you heard that. Okay, what's his name is over there? Let me go get a haircut.
Yeah, Sal's in business.
Right.
You know, and if you did a good job, like at the defense plants and so forth, they said, hey, Sal's barbershop's open 5 o'clock in the morning. You want a good shave? That's where you go.
I know you talked about like not special treatment, but special precautions. He would cut the hair on Sundays, and they would pick him up. Were there any other special things that you could remember or think about that they did?
Well, again, my dad, if you were his customer and you were in a hospital, nursing home, sick at home, on his day off,
he'd come take care of you.
he'd come take care of you.
So it wasn't just like the mobsters was getting special treatment.
No,
it was everybody.
Everybody.
Well, that's probably what made him so good.
Yeah, and he'd say, if they were healthy enough to come to me,
right,
and they can't come to me now I go to them. And so he would go and take care of it. No charge. He wouldn't charge him. He just took care of him.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the atmosphere like? I mean, obviously you had seen some guys come in who were just like not normal clientele. What would the atmosphere like when those type of guys come in?
Well, he treated them just like a normal customer, you know. If you're somebody homeless, like coming off the street,
right.
I'll give you for an instance. I had a high school buddy that, well, he's dead anyhow now. I could use his name, Jackie. And Jackie was on drugs, you know. We're sitting in a bar one night. Jack gets off the stool, walks out the door. We don't see Jackie for a day, 2 days. We don't see him for 6 months. We don't see Jackie for a year. Where the heck's Jackie? Nobody knows where Jackie is. All of a sudden, this guy walks into my barbershop. Long hair, down to his waist, all the way around. Just walks in, sits down. My dad afterwards said, who the heck's this guy in his, you know. Well, anyhow, next, the guy comes up, sits down, and he says, Sal, I want a regular haircut and I want a shave. Okay. You don't know who this guy is. He starts peeling him with the stuff. He gets where he can see who. He says, Jesus Christ, Jackie, where you been?
Jackie been hiding out.
Jackie had been living over on the east side in New York on LSD and everything else and decided to come back home. And
right.
So, excuse me. I'm sorry, I should turn that off. But anyhow.
Jackie disappeared for a while.
Jackie disappeared for a while. Dad just treated him just like anybody else would. And so, but you know, that's how he treated people.
Right.
He didn't know it was Jackie until he
You're fine. You're good. You're good.
And but that was, you know, just one of those things. Anybody, if you're a new customer, he was going to make you a customer for life. You know.
So, obviously, was the atmosphere ever tense if one of those guys came in and everybody was getting a haircut? Because people know who those guys are.
Yeah.
You know who mobsters are when you come into a barbershop. Was it ever tense or?
I think if it was with the other people in the shop, you know, it was toned down. And I think my dad just took care of him, give him the haircut, out the door.
Right.
You know, and I think he would have been able to take care of himself.
Right.
You know, the razor.
I mean, the razor is dangerous.
Matter of fact, one time my dad always wore shoes that was smooth toe, and his razor was slipped out of his hand while he was strapping it, flipped over, hit his shoe, and split the top of his shoe open.
Wow.
Like you were cutting a piece of meat.
Did he cut himself?
You know, it just stopped, split the leather on his shoe.
Oh, man.
Yeah, because on Wednesday or Sunday, you know, he had the tools in the drawer.
Mm-hmm.
That was a day to sit there and sharpen them.
Yep.
Yeah. Put the soap on the stone and go.
So your memories of a hair, what was the price of haircuts back then, if you remember?
Well, they were like 75 cents. Then they went to $1.25. Then they went to $1.75, and then the last one, just before he retired, they went to $3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when those mops was getting a haircut, how much you think they was paying your dad? About $10?
I hope they paid him a heck of a lot more.
I mean, because if he has to go, they have to come pick him up. He has to go in a van or just go, and he would just cut him on the weekends or after hours.
Yeah, on a Wednesday or Sunday.
Right.
Yeah.
So if he's going,
day off.
if he's going to them, I mean, if a haircut price was 75 cents, you going to at least had to pay you $6 or something.
Yeah. Well, maybe more. Who knows?
Right.
I never did. Again.
He never talked about that.
No. What? Again.
Even in his, as he's retired, and he never had conversation about what it was like cutting those guys' hair.
No. I just. You know, there was a lot of things about my dad. I like to know.
Right.
But I don't know, because
He was just close-lipped.
closed lip.
Do you ever wish that you could have had a conversation and sit there and talk to him? Because that could be an interesting story.
Oh, yeah. But
Not even your mother knew about nobody.
no, what? And again, my mother, if they, you know, like they say, you know, go up the stairs if Fanny feed you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whatever they told her, it was a dead story there.
Because now, for like a traveling barber, if he has to travel from his house and go to someone else's house
Yeah.
and cut their hair, it's typically about $75 to $100.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, now, but back then, I'm saying it had to be at least 10. At least, and if they dealing with what they dealing with, those mobsters, I'm assuming at least gave them at least $15.
It could have been.
Yeah.
Again, I have no knowledge of
Or
it.
gave them the first dibs on like the meat truck coming by or something.
Nothing came like that.
Oh,
No.
you in a meat truck coming, you get like the first dib on a 5 gallon of rice or something.
Like I say, he wanted, you do your business,
Right.
I'll do my business. We'll stay good friends, you know, and ended up, they both got killed during the investigation, the Kefauver investigation, because they were going to go state's evidence. And
Who got killed?
Willie Moretti, he got killed on the Palisades there. And his,
So that's one of your dad's clients?
yeah, well, Willie Moretti was his boyhood friend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the mafia, and so
That's deep, man.
yeah, he got well. It got to the point during that Kefauver investigation that was, you know, they were trying to bust up the mafia and so forth, and he was going to go state's evidence, and
And this is in New York. What part of New York?
New Jersey.
Jersey,
Matter of
yeah.
fact, he got shot in a restaurant on the Palisades just
Right.
before you go into New York near the George Washington Bridge.
Man.
And he and his bodyguard.
I mean, but that's the interesting thing about barbering. And I tell people all the time, barbering it crosses so many different types of layers and so many people gets involved in
Yeah.
how our industry is so essential.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they had to be clean. They wanted to be well-groomed.
Well-
and they had to come and get a haircut. And knowing what your dad did for a living, being a real astute, real clean, real disciplined in his haircuts, they want the best.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you know, when I came to Tennessee in 1958, a haircut here in Greenville, the barbershops, was $1.25. And you know what a transition that was from New Jersey. It was $3 there.
Wow.
$1.25 here.
Whew.
You know, and I couldn't believe it.
You wanted to get like 3 haircuts in a day.
Yeah. Well, I alluded to the fact earlier when we were talking outside that I started cutting hair in the dormitory.
Right.
two of my buddies that on the basketball team were going to go home to Norton in Appalachia, Virginia for the weekend to get a haircut.
Right.
And Saturday night they were still there. And I said, hey, I thought you would go home and get a haircut. We didn't have money to go home. I said, well, I'll cut your hair. And they said, yeah. And all I had was a razor and a scissor and a comb. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what my father did all those years of me watching.
You picked it up.
I picked it up. I said, come on, I'll cut your hair. I cut their hair. We went to breakfast the next morning, and the guys on the team said, hey, you went home and got a haircut. And they said, no, little man cut our hair. So I said, oh, my gosh.
So were you making money back then in college?
No. So I just cut their hair, you know.
For free?
Yeah. And
you could have a lucrative career.
well, what happened was one of my buddies, Bob Skilton, may he rest in peace, he said, Santo, you ought to charge. I said, okay. From now on, anybody comes to get a haircut, it's free. But the next time I cut your hair, it's going to charge you 50 cents.
What?
I'm going to either put myself in business
Right.
or I'm getting out of it. Well, don't you know, I started making money like crazy. I went home for Thanksgiving and said to my mother, can I have some of Daddy's tools? She said, just go to the Barber Supply in Carlstead, Casellos, and get what you need.
Right.
So I went and bought stuff that I needed. I went back.
And you was making money.
And I was making money.
Wow.
Yeah. Before you know it, my economics professor, Captain Wilson, this is how Captain talked. Mr. Cicerillo. I say, yeah, Captain. I understand you have a tonsorial parlor.
Tonsorial parlor.
My buddy said, what are you into now? I said, that's a barber shop. Captain says, Mr. Cicerillo, where do you conduct your business? I said, over in Morgan Hall. If you come in the dorm, backstairs, there's my rooms right there. When would I make an appointment? Well,
so you big time now when the professor asks you for a haircut.
After supper, I said, Captain, I will be there. Well, don't you know, I cut his hair, you know, all the 9 yards, massaged his head like you normally do in a barber shop, and you comb it, you shave him around the ears and powder him down and everything else. And he says, Mr. Cicerillo, you have magnificent touch.
I mean, you was watching it for years with your dad, so you had to pick something up.
Yeah. Well, end up, before you know it, I had other professors, janitors, and I was almost, at 50 cents, almost averaging almost $15 a week.
I mean, but that's good money back then.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Because you're looking at it, if that was saying at 50 cents, you're doing about 20
haircuts.
20 haircuts a week. That's good money.
I could go out down to Connie's, there's a beer joint down there, and get me a sirloin steak that hang off the plate for $2 on that money.
Oh, man, Mitch, you hearing this?
And the thing about it was, everybody thought I was a rich kid. I wasn't rich. I was cutting hair.
You sound like me when I was in college. I was cutting hair in college, and I started off cutting hair in college. It was like $3. And then it seemed like everybody was taking advantage. I was like, man, and I was like, no, I can't because I would be just cutting hair and not going to class.
Yeah.
So I raised it up to $5.
Well, I never, no. Well, there was 2 other barbers on campus. And they would come back to me, you know, flat tops were in and what have you. And they say, Santo, can you fix my hair? I said, what happened? I went to Albert, and I went to Farouk. And I said, okay. I said, it costs you 50 cents.
Right.
You know? So I trim them up, level it out, because they'd be halfway, you know, digs and corners. Took care of it. And, then those other 2 guys said, well, let's charge you a little more money. So I don't care. Whatever you want to charge.
Right.
75 cents. So when I graduated in 63, I charged 75 cents a haircut. And then when I went to Washington College Academy to teach, we had dorm students. Darn, if I wasn't the campus barber, cutting all the boys' hair on campus.
But so you had another business.
Yeah.
I mean, being a barber, that was another business. As you transition into another job,
Yeah.
that's a viable business. You ever thought about just going to it full time?
Well, I thought about it, yeah. And, well, I loved coaching and teaching,
Right.
you know. And I don't know if I could have spent the time and hours that in one place,
Right.
you know, in a barber, in the chair, in that facility at all times. I would go to nursing homes and cut people's hair there. They found out that they could get somebody. I'll be there. I did Meals on Wheels, and I'd go around and those people there, I'd cut their hair. You know, I'd say, whenever I'd keep my tools in the car,
Right.
and I'd cut their hair, and wouldn't charge them. Just had a good time.
Did you ever think about being a barber full time?
Well, I thought about it. Like I just alluded to the fact that I just did not know if I wanted to stay put.
Right.
And there was other things that I wanted to do. You know?
But you had the makeup of a barber. You had because barbers, even back then when your dad was doing it, barbers retired pretty well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's a great income. You're retiring pretty well.
Well, you know, way back then, it was a cash business.
Yes.
You know, and I don't know if you could cheat the government or not with the cash business, but you know, if you were frugal, like my mother and dad. My dad bought a 1933 Chevrolet. The next car that he bought was a 1951.
Brand new.
Brand new, cash on the barrelhead.
He's making good money.
Yeah.
When you can do that, you're making good money.
And he was supporting a family in Sicily.
Wow.
But my mother could sew, you know. We would ask the customers if they had, we were like a Salvation Army. In the back store where my weight room was, we had more clothes and shoes and everything. Freddie and Nikki, some Italian friends, had a shoe shop. They would fix the shoes.
Right.
They had family over there. My mother would.
Yeah, once you're a barber, man, you have, like your dad, I could just imagine how much the connections he had in the whole community.
Sure.
So he had a beat on almost anything that he wanted.
Yeah, if Allison's drugstore, good old, he was Italian. We needed medicine. We were sending medicine to Sicily, to the folks that needed it.
And then once you're a barber too, I'm pretty sure your dad did this too. Once you're a barber, you can get a lot of stuff on consignment, on just his name. He can get stuff on his name and pay them later.
Well, no later pay on him. Listen, if you came into the barbershop with the towels, you got paid then. If you were Consuelo with the barber supply, you got paid then. Matter of fact, the other night I started digging around on stuff that my dad, when they died, you know, I just took it, put it in a closet.
Right.
And the other night I decided, I said, I'm going to dig this. What do I got here?
Right.
Well, I started digging. There were 3 Ostner clippers.
Right.
Brand new.
Wow.
Never been used. I can't use them unless I could get new wires for them because the wires have dried out and cracked.
But they're in pristine shape.
Brand new, you know. But he wanted to make sure
Right.
he had backups.
For sure. I mean, as a barber, you always want backup.
Yeah. With the little children, he always used the hand clipper.
Yes.
You know, he had, I bet you'd never seen a clippers that was on a stand. The clippers had a long auger.
What?
Yeah, that's what it stood on the stand. And
Do you have that?
no,
You should have kept all that stuff.
I don't know what he did with it.
Somebody probably, your sister, somebody probably got it.
I don't know if she got it or not, but that was quite a thing. Here's a stand with 4 wheels, with a motor,
Right.
and it's got an auger on it, rotor in there, and the machine.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah. But again, he kept things
Immaculate.
immaculate. His tools, the scissors, we would take them over to Harlem in New York to a German fella over there would hone scissors.
Yep.
And he was the only guy that could satisfy my dad in taking care of his scissors.
Wow.
Yeah. And about every 2 weeks, we would go with a bag full of scissors. Because, if my dad, it was
So what was your dad's name?
Sal.
Sal.
When he was doing that it was scissors and combs.
Yep.
Scissors, combs. And he'd get you in and out of that chair quick.
I bet you your dad would have been a great instructor.
Oh,
He'd have been a great teacher because, cutting hair since he was 12 years old in Italy,
yeah.
that's a long time.
Well, a funny story was he didn't believe that I was cutting hair.
You didn't want to tell him? You didn't want to show him?
Don't say anything. He came down for vacation. And I was working over at the pepper mill, Dunbar pepper mill. And there was a little boy named Johnny. And at lunchtime, he would always come over, and I would make peanut butter and crackers.
Right.
And Johnny would come over and sit down. I'd make extra so Johnny could have crackers with me at lunchtime. And I said to Johnny, you're getting woolly. You need to get a haircut. He said, well, I can't get a haircut. He said, my papa is an invalid in bed. My grandma works at the daytime and mama works at night. I said, I tell you what, ask your mother if I could cut your hair. I'll bring my tools tomorrow. Well, he came back over there for lunch, and he came over, and we sat down, and he said, they can cut my hair. Can you cut Papa's hair too?
Wow.
I said, sure. Just as soon as I get out of work here, we'll go over there and cut your hair. So I cut Johnny's hair, cut Papa's hair. Didn't charge him. My dad and mother come down to visit for summer vacation. I went to work, and I said to my wife, bring my dad and mother over and show them the pepper mill. Well, just as soon as I got out of work, Johnny could run it over, and we're walking around showing my dad the place. my dad sees, I said, Johnny, this is my dad. And hello. My dad says, they must have pretty good barbers here in Tennessee. He's got a good haircut. I said, Johnny, who cut your hair? You did. Dad didn't say something, nothing. Next year, he comes down for vacation. I said, how come you don't have a haircut? Cousin Paul didn't come and cut your hair? Because they would trade off.
Right.
Every 2 weeks, Cousin Paul would come to the house. They'd cut each other's hair. He'd take him back to Lyndhurst. I said, how come he didn't get hair? Paul, he was sick. He couldn't come cut my hair. I said, all right, come on the porch. Why? I said, dagli la capita. I said, I'm going to cut your hair. I cut in Italian. Dagli la capita, hair. Siéntate.
Siéntate.
No. My mother comes out. She says, let him cut hair. He's been cut hair, and you don't know for so long. So anyhow, he gets in the chair. I do just like he would do in a barbershop.
You've seen him for so many years, so you know exactly what to do.
Right. And I said, metta la testa così, batta la testa for forfeiture. I said, put your head still, because if you don't, I'm going to hit you in the head with the scissor, like you did me. Boom. If I didn't keep my head still, he'd whack me with that scissor. I probably got a tumor growing in my head from all the wax on my head.
Oh, man, that's interesting.
Yeah, but for that time, then when he retired, every 2 weeks, cut my hair.
You had enough practice of watching. You've seen enough time, so.
Yeah, and the day before he died in the hospital, I went down and I said, tu pare brutto, you look terrible. And I said, domani tomorrow. Fa o Bible. I'm going to shave you tomorrow. Si, y para bruto. I look terrible. So I went down, I took this, hot towel, got it nice, and I massaged it with the cream. Then I put
Get them right.
Then I put the soap on it, and when I got done, washed his face, hot toweled him,
Made him feel good.
Made him feel good. Took the little lemon cream, rubbed his face real good. He said, didn't say it was good. He just shook.
I mean, that's a nod of approval. That means it's good. I mean, but that's how he's been doing all his life. Even when he was in the barber shop in New York, New Jersey, he'd be like, as a head nod.
He died the next day. Died the next day. Yeah. So I kissed him when he died and told him I loved him.
But a lot of people
gave him a good haircut to get to heaven.
I mean, but and that's impressive. That's impressive because for a long time people didn't look at barbering as a viable career to take care of your family.
Oh yeah.
And barbering is a great trade. It's one of the oldest trades in the world.
I look back on what I could have made in being a barber, and what I have cut hair and giving.
Right.
I felt like my dad was given a trade.
Yep.
He learned it well. He didn't know. He never said, do this, do that to me as a mentor. But by me just watching him do things in that barbershop, resonated in my mind that I could do that.
You learned plenty of lessons.
I learned the lessons, because my son Sal, he's named after my dad. He always, when my father, we called him Dada, an Italian grandfather, he'd say to the kids, watch. They'd be in the garden or doing something. Watch.
Right.
He never told me, watch. But I watched him do things in the barbershop. And I thank the Lord now because I have been able to give a gift of love.
Right. You learned plenty of lessons in that barbershop.
Yeah. I learned how to meet people, be friendly. I see people on the street, and it was, hello, Mr. Smith. Hello, Mr. Jones. Uncle so-and-so, Uncle Jim. And my buddies say, how come you got so many uncles?
Out of respect.
They're customers of my dad.
Right.
When I walked in that barbershop and they were in there.
Respect.
Hello, Mr. Yeah.
So you learned plenty of lessons, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. You learn so much lessons in the barbershop. It's more than just cutting hair.
Yeah. It was almost like a club.
Yes.
Friday nights, Saturday nights, that was the most busiest time. My dad would be in the barbershop until 10 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, cutting hair.
He's making good money.
Yeah.
Honest money.
Sunday morning.
He had to go cut the mafias.
Well.
Go to church first.
No, he didn't go to church. He after that incident in Sicily with the priest.
He stopped going to church.
He quit.
Because the priest, they want money, but they don't want to pay you money.
He didn't want to go to.
I wouldn't want to go either because how you gonna go give a haircut and don't even just like, hey.
He did come upstairs with a story about the priest. The priest used to come to get a haircut. I don't know if he paid him or not. I'm sure my dad got money from him. But anyhow. He did come upstairs with this story.
He probably told him that was his what you call it when you put the money in the pot.
Offering.
Offer for getting the haircut.
Well, I'll tell you what. He did come upstairs with this story. Somebody came to the barbershop. My dad had a table. My son still got the table that had magazines. The news, the daily news.
Right.
That was the Bible. And anyhow. Somebody put a Playboy back there.
What?
Yeah, brought it in and left it there. Well, anyhow, when the priest got the haircut, my dad came upstairs afterwards and said, The priest, he told me this, get rid of that book back there. It was a Playboy magazine. He says, that's no good to anybody to look at. He says, I told him it was good enough for you to look at. It's good to look for anybody to look at. But that's one story.
The priest probably had his own Playboy magazine at his house. Who knows?
Well, I wasn't raised Catholic because my dad, when he married my mother, she was in an orphanage.
Right.
In a Catholic orphanage in New York.
Right.
And my grandfather was a baker. And back then, her mother died at 3. And so when you're a baker, you make the dough, you make the bread, bake it, you deliver it.
Right, you don't have time.
Yeah. So into the orphanage she went. My mother said the only time she ate real well is when, because the way it worked is, she told stories that whoever paid full, you ate down the line. If there was any food left over for those that didn't pay much,
right.
She said the only time she did eat well is when one of the sisters would take her out begging.
And
she said, I was tiny, emaciated, and she said that sister would take me and feed me.
Wow.
And she said then her dad got a bakery in New Haven, Connecticut.
Right.
When he got to New Haven, there was no Catholic orphanage.
Right.
But there was
big.
like a farm, which was an Episcopal place. So he put her there. And she said, that Episcopal home, she said, we had a garden, we had cows. She said, they would put a pitcher of milk on the table. She said, I could drink all the milk I wanted, And so then her mother's sister finally found my grandfather in New Haven from Garfield, New Jersey, and went up there and said, hey, Dominic, where's your daughter? She's in a nursing home. He said, in an orphanage. He said, we didn't have any children. Why didn't you let us have her? We'd have raised her. She was 13 at the time.
Right.
He says, you want her? You go take her. So they took her to New Jersey. She learned how to sew.
Yeah, she learned the trade.
Learned the trade, how to sew, because they had a factory of men's and women's clothing. And so when they met my dad, in 53 days, he met and they got married.
Wow.
And he said
that's impressive.
She said, you're Catholic. I'm not getting married in a Catholic church. He said, I don't care. So when he got married in an Episcopal church, he got excommunicated.
Wow.
That, you're done for.
Man, this podcast is one of my favorites. We can go forever.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's what we did. So when they started having children, my sister was raised Episcopalian. When I came along 6 years later after my sister, I was into the Episcopal Church.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Because you think most Italians are Catholic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know the Nome Patrifica Santos stuff. That's all.
So I love this podcast because it gives a glimpse of barbering on so many different levels.
Yeah.
What would you sum up about your barbering career?
Well, I could think of so many things that I learned a gift from my dad who did not force me.
That's big.
So many children, you have a son. You're going to become a barber. You're going to become a
football player, soccer player.
Yeah, you're going to become a doctor. You're going to, so many times you are forced to please your father. My father never did that. He was stern. I'd walk through that barber shop ready to protect the back of my head and my butt. Because
something's coming.
Something would beat me home that I was going to get a kick in the butt or scorch of the gourd.
Right.
If that means a slap behind the head, that I did something that somebody saw me do.
For sure.
And that learning that barber trade that my dad had, it gave me the aptitude to pass it on to people that I could cut their hair when they were sick, when they couldn't get to the barber shop, that I could go to them just like my dad did.
Big.
Because he did that with love in his heart. He never said that he loved Jesus, but he never said he was a Christian.
But his actions.
But his actions spoke louder than words.
That's big.
And if I didn't go to church on Sunday, I was a heathen. Yeah. He didn't go to church, and I never questioned that.
Right.
But
he wanted good for you.
yeah, you know, he never said, Santo, I love you. And when both my mother and dad got sick, they didn't want to go to nursing home. They lived right next door to me. And I vowed that I would take care of them.
Right.
The good book says, honor and your mother and your father.
Yes.
Now, I wasn't always a good boy.
I mean, none of us were.
And so I was going to fulfill that dream.
That's big.
And when I couldn't be there, I stayed 86 weekends from Friday night to Monday morning, non-sleep. I went to school on Friday morning and didn't go to sleep until Monday afternoon because I turned my mother every 15 minutes. I washed her every morning, changed the sheets. My dad would fall, what have you. And I had people come in. Every night, I make sure they were taken care of. I told those ladies, I don't care. What do you drink? What kind of coffee? What kind of food? Snacks? Whatever. Your main objective is to take care of my mother and father.
Yes.
You come in the morning, you strip my mother down, you wash her, you wash those sheets, whatever my dad wants. If he doesn't like the meal, I'll cook it, because I can cook it as good as my mother. Mrs. Cassard, one of the ladies that stayed until 12 o'clock, I would always go over there, go and kiss my mother, tell her I love her. Good night, Dad. I love you, and leave. Mrs. Cassard said to me one day, she said, I confronted your dad. Oh, what do you do now? You know, because he was hardcore. She said, I confronted your dad last night. She says, your son comes here every night. He goes and tells his mother, good night, Mom, I love you. I'll see you in the morning. He tells you he loves you, and you never respond. She said he didn't lift up his head, and he just said, he knows it.
And that's impactful.
So,
Impactful.
My dad was a good man. He did things that I would notice, and then I could emulate him. And through barbering, I could emulate him as to things that he did with loving care. Although he never said he was a Christian, he was a Christian by his actions.
You know it. So all good things. This is one of my favorite podcasts. All good things got to come to an end. So what was your lasting impression of this barbering industry? What did you learn from your dad from this barbering industry?
That it is an art, that when you learn to barber, you learn your customer, because all heads are different.
Mm-hmm.
And when that person gets in the chair, you treat him like the best person you know, that when you let him go out of that chair, he is well pleased at what you have done for him.
That's big. That's big. Major. So tell everybody your name and and your full first and last name as we close. And what was your lasting words about on this podcast?
My name is Santos Cicerello. I'm 83 years old. God has been good. And this has been a wonderful experience for me to sit down and talk about a part of my life that sometimes we don't sit down and think about it.
And reflect.
And how great it was. It was. And maybe at that time it was, but now when you can reflect back on it, God was good.
God is good.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And again, Barber College Success, brought to you by Craig Charles of Crown Cutz Academy, JC, and Crown Cutz Academy, Bristol. Spreading love the JC way is one way, but spreading love the Crown Cutz way is the only way. We had a special episode today from Mr. Cicerello.
Yes.
And I thank you for coming on. And we have to get you on again, because everyone who comes on the podcast one time, we have to get you on again.
My pleasure.
Your voice has to be heard. And we have a lot of stories. This is, I think, upwards 140 episodes. And we're broadcast again across the world. The United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, so many places around this world that we broadcast the barbers around the country. And people like to hear our stories. People love hearing barber stories and where it started, where it originated, where it came from. Because I do believe we all are one, and barbering is something that connects people on different cultures, on different ethnicities around the world. And it's just a great trade, and this podcast is a hope to let people understand that, hey, you can be a barber, and you can do wonderful things, and you can make an honest living. Yeah. And that's what it's about. Again, Barber College Success, brought to you by Craig Charles of Crown Cutz Academy, JC, and Craig's Crown Cutz downtown, JC, and Crown Cutz Academy in Bristol, Virginia. Spreading love the JC way is one way, but spreading love the Crown Cutz way is the only way. Peace.